And the last, and definitely not forgotten. We got Jack.
All right, how we doing, everybody? First and foremost, I really just want to shout out Zach and Caitlin because a wedding is like an operation. Like, there are so many moving parts, and they have nailed everyone today. It's just been amazing from front to back. So let's get started. Also, I'd like to shout out the first three speakers. To put it frankly and plainly, I'm a teacher, but I'm not teaching right now, so it takes balls to get up here and talk. I'm telling you right now. Let's hear it for these three. So I met Zach back in Dr. Berghart's 7th grade social studies class. I was more of a nuisance, and he was more of a studious student, so I bothered him a lot. And then eventually he started hanging out with me for some reason, so that was pretty cool. And we spent most of our high school kind of living like a weird modern Lewis and Clark. We'd rush home after school and canoe up the river of the mighty DuPage, a roaring water that was so pure when your skin touched it would itch for probably 30. Do not recommend going anywhere near that river. Stay 10 miles away from it. It is no good. We would camp out in that prairie, though, and just, it was the best. Just sitting around a campfire with a Dollar Tree snack and a can of Mountain Dew, you know, normal stuff, healthy stuff. And we'd hike to the 7-Eleven in the middle of the night, meeting all kinds of characters on the prairie path at about 2 in the morning. Normal kid stuff. You know, I'm sure we've all had that experience. But I've known Caitlin as long as Zach has known her for the most part, and it just amazes me how they both bring out the creativity in another. In that they're both creative people individually, but together it's like putting the Wonder Twin rings together and just exploding. Their Halloween parties are insane. If you haven't been, you gotta go. If you're invited, because it's kind of a hot ticket. But I really wouldn't be up here talking like this, confident enough to talk in front of people if it weren't for Zach. Because way back when, there was a small black box variety show at our high school called Spifforama. And Zach went up there and he gave this monologue about the plot of Star Wars. And I remember seeing it and thinking, like, my God, a nerd like me can get up there and do that? That's insane. So the next year, Zach hosted, and I mustered up the strength to do a skit myself, and one with Zach as well. And they were fantastic. They've been lost to time, don't look for them. But, I mean, really good stuff. So, I mean, you guys have made a terrific life together, and I have to shout out America's Bad Boy Pidge. And I figured as a gift to you, so there's some holes in Pidge's story. In that Zach took him in, so he was found by a dumpster near the Niles AMC. That's all we know about him. And he faked a broken leg, which I always thought that was kind of weird for a wild animal. So I did some research. I'm a bit of an amateur historian. I did some digging, and let's just say there's a wormhole, and I'd like to share my findings, but first I'm going to preface it with, if there's anyone in this room who has an aversion to having their mind blown, please leave the premises immediately. Too late. Peter, may you hold this? Oh, I've been up to 3 days, people. Rotate. Thank you. Put it down. Thank you. This will be on the test, take notes. I'm calling all of your parents, and I'm serious about that. I do not mess around in the classroom. Our story begins in 1961. Our story begins in 1961. The Bay of Pigs invasion. President Kennedy called in air support. It never arrived. We don't know to this day why it did not, but Kennedy swore he would never have air support missing again. He undertook a controversial project. It was the 60s. We did the best we could. We had Uncle Stalin breathing down our neck. We had to level the playing field. In comes a top secret Department of Defense CIA initiative known as Project Pidge, Prolonged Infiltration Design Guardian Experiment. Their goal was to make a creature, a being, a weapon, so fast, so strong, it could infiltrate, exfiltrate, commiserate, whatever you wanted it to do. Kennedy would never live to see the results of the experiment, But I found these documents that explain exactly what happened. By reducing the frontal lobe, the reasoning center of the brain, by fine-tuning his wings for slapping ability, a sharpened beak for pecking, he was the ultimate fighting machine. Now, at the same time, across the pond, the Rooskies started their own operation, as they were known to do. Operation Breadbasket, a controversial derivative trying to find if we applied radioactive plutonium to millet, could we be the breadbasket that our Soviet satellite nations need? No, they found out. All they wound up with was crates and crates of irradiated grain, which they quickly shipped off to those satellite nations for cattle feed or paving roads or whatever you wanted to do with it. That's just kind of how the Russians did it. Anyway, Project Pidge was first deployed in the Vietnam War. 1967, Operation Daniel Boone. What was supposed to be a covert operation, a simple cross over the Laotian border for MACV SOG troops, resulted in something bigger. We know Pidge was there. We know he went out that border. And it was here in Vietnam he would be given his nickname Mr. Tippy Taps. Because as the Viet Cong said, the last thing you heard before your lights went out were the little tippy taps on the hot floor. It was ruthless. But there on that raid, he discovered the crate of that Soviet grain. That glowing green Soviet grain. He took one bite and he was hooked. He couldn't stop. It made him bigger, badder, stronger, better than he was already. So, Pidge goes AWOL. We don't know much about him from the early 1970s to the mid-1970s, but we have photos of him with several dictators of the time. Ceausescu in Romania, Tito in the Balkans, Muveko Sosiku in the Belgian Congo. Were the Dutch in it? I don't know. From there, he stayed as long as that sweet, sweet green kept flowing. That sweet green grain, I should say. When it ran out, he went to anyone else who had Soviet supplies, including Manuel Noriega in Panama, where he earned his controversial nickname El Niño Malo. The bad boy. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Noriega's calling you a bad boy, you are a bad, bad boy. From there, I hate to say it, but Pidge went straight to Saddam Hussein, who had the last remaining reserves of that Soviet grain. He needed it bad. We had him cornered. We had him pinned down. We had him with his back against the wall in Kuwait, but he escaped. We don't know how. Could have been Soviets. Who knows? All we know from there, the U.S. Marshals have been a hot lead on him. Several surveillance photos have turned up ticks, but nothing came to fruition. Until roughly 10 years ago. We believe Pidge was involved in a shipment of grain from North Korea. The heat got pretty bad. He figured he'd settle down in a Midwestern town like Niles, Illinois. Hide in a common place, right outside an AMC. Who would see him blending in with the other pigeons? And who would be there to see him when a naive, caring, heart-bleeding young vet would take him as his own. Now, you might be wondering, what ties this all together? Why Zach? Why pick him? I have the answer. Years ago at a Halloween party, Caitlin ran out into the yard excitedly to tell me the most important news I'd heard in a long time. By using a Ouija board in that garage, they determined that their house was haunted by the ghost of none other than President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Where better to hide than with the man who created him? And when Caitlin announced that, I swear I heard the faint coo of a pigeon from inside the house. And on that note, my case is closed. But again, I couldn't have done this without Zach. I hope Caitlin, thanks for putting up with this nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. Thank you all for
Ladies and gentlemen, one time for Jack and whatever the hell that was.